Any good educational program must have a theoretical background. And very briefly, I want to share with you the theoretical background that is behind the international educational delivery that is evident in my school, and I'm sure in many others. Before doing so, let me explain to you that when people talk about international education, they do so from very different standpoints. There are 4 types of schools in the international educational world. There are international schools that are in international settings. These are genuinely international institutions. There are national schools in international settings. By and large, these are not international schools delivering an international experience. They are merely a transposition of a national school into another country. There are national schools with an international focus in a national setting, and I would put the school that I'm principal of in category C. And this is the majority of schools in countries around the world, and it's these schools that have the best opportunity of educating students for global change and global leadership, because it is these schools that educate the majority of students around the world. And then there are a few international schools aligned to national schools in a national setting. China is an example of a country that has embraced this category. So our theoretical background for delivering an effective international education is to identify what we call domains of effectiveness, areas of influence that could indeed ensure that we are effectively delivering a genuinely international experience for our students. They embrace governance, school leadership, students, staff, the curricula, co-curricular activities, technology, and, like all good educational program, a process of validation. The global construct for delivering this educational experience is based upon providing genuine curriculum links between various areas within the school programs. We need, for example, to relate peace building and conflict resolution to sustainable futures. Sustainable futures to identity and cultural diversity. Acknowledge that our interdependence is also inherently based around an absorption of dimensions of change. And importantly, as I mentioned at the top of this presentation, an understanding that social justice and human rights is something which we, as citizens of the world, should be aspiring for everybody. Our approaches to international education are based around 4 key areas: activity, competency, ethos, and process. Each is very closely linked to each other. There are many activities that embrace international education. There are competencies that we're trying to develop in our young men and women. There is an ethos that exists in the school that must be at the heart of all that we do and all that we stand for. And, as I mentioned before, defining international education is about defining not an end product, but a journey or a process. So let me, in the time that remains, just share with you what has been happening at my school, Ivanhoe Grammar School in Melbourne, a school of about 2,000 students, co-educational, in terms of this transformation from a national, inward-looking school to an outward-looking, internationally focused one. I talk about Ivanhoe Grammar School as being a national school providing an outward, global-looking curriculum for a diverse and internationally based student body, both geographically and diversely. As I mentioned, we're a school that's nearly 100 years old. We have around 2,000 students. Most of them go to university, most of them in Australia. And we're co-education with a very diverse student population. The key areas of reform for us have been the curriculum, but beyond classroom initiatives, which particularly includes Round Square, and the embracing of technology. Let me explain. These are the domains of effectiveness that I talked about before, that any school wishing to embrace international education might consider as the framework around which those programs could be developed. I want to say something about each one of these very briefly in the context of my school. Firstly, governance. We're a non-for-profit company school. The Board of Governors, the governing body, provides great support for this international directive. In the school strategic plan, written 10 years ago, it talked about developing and promoting an international mindset in the minds of students as a means of developing attitudes and skills of critical value to students in this century. We rewrote the plan just last year, and amongst other things, in that we talked about developing global competency and identifying skills and how we might measure them. In any key educational program, leadership is important. Initiatives from the leader of the school, but also recognising that it needs to be a shared responsibility. And I've been able to appoint some key people who have helped in terms of developing this international approach to our student education. One of the critical things is to allow the leaders of the school to develop networks, both onshore and offshore. We're very lucky at my school because we have a hugely diverse student population. These are the nationalities that are represented at the school, and you can just see by the number of names on the slide the diversity that exists and reflecting multicultural Melbourne. And these are the home languages spoken. Many of the families don't speak English, even though the children do. So at the school we have a wonderful asset to be able to use to help implement this approach to education. We have some overseas students as well, students that come specifically for study. And we've been having students from particularly this part of the world since 1941. We have now about 80 students, or about 4%, mostly from Southeast Asia. The students are critical to the implementation of this international approach to education. They exchange with schools around the globe. They host students. We celebrate national days. We have international assemblies that are run and organised entirely by students. And we have recognition, explicit recognitions, such as our One World Award, which recognises a student that has done the most to promote intercultural understanding within our school. We have committees that emphasise multiculturalism, international students, environment and Round Square. No program will be sustainable without the buy-in of staff. Students come and go, staff remain. And so for this program to be sustainable year after year, it requires a great deal of engagement and support from staff. One of the things we do is actively look for staff that have had international experience, that have an understanding of what we're trying to achieve. We provide scholarships for some of our staff to go overseas and study during the holidays, to develop and bring back new ideas from different parts of the world that can assist in embedding our approach to international education. We provide our staff with professional development links, both onshore and offshore, including our participation in the Bridge program run by the Asia Education Foundation. And I'm very hopeful that in 2012 we'll add Korea to our current involvement with Indonesia. We've also started to deliver curriculum in other parts of the world, particularly in China. And after this afternoon I'll travel to Beijing to visit one of the schools that is receiving the Victorian Certificate of Education delivered by Chinese teachers, trained by our own teachers, trained by Australian teachers, delivering it in English. And the great benefit for this is that it provides our staff with an opportunity to be engaged on the world stage in delivering education into the minds, the hearts and the classrooms of students in another part of the world.